Now, the mining industry once contributed 10% to South Africa's GDP. Now, it accounts for only 4.4%, the lowest level in 10 years. Now, this is just one of the challenges discussed at the two-day Joburg Indaba. Various stakeholders, captains of industry and government officials gathered under the theme, Investing in Resources and Mining Africa. With us to dissect the state of South Africa's mining, as well as the outcomes of the summit, is Joburg Indaba chairperson Bernard Swanepoel. A very good morning to you, Bernard. One of the issues, as far as mining is concerned, as we said in our opening, very much a backbone of the industry and very much of a large contributor when it comes historically to the country's GDP. But that has consistently been declining. Give us some of the reasons why. I'm sure there are a multitude of factors.
Yeah, no, thank you. As you've indicated, we are still significant and a significant contributor, but a lot less than what we should be. And we can externalize the blame, but I think what we've done is we've dealt with what is out of our control, commodity markets, etc., infrastructure issues, but also, obviously, there's always a lot that is under our control. The new development is obviously the preparedness of government to allow private sector and business leaders and CEOs to start to assist to fix some of these underlying problems. Right now, there are very constructive engagements underway, as has previously been reported, between CEOs and the parastatals. There's an energy cluster, logistics cluster, and there's even some work being done in crime, in the crime area. Now, these are the things that needs to be fixed. We actually can mine a lot more, and we are mining a lot more than what our railway lines are able to take to the ports, or our ports are able to load onto the ships. That's just criminal inefficiency. I think some of the numbers thrown around is that we could have had 50 billion rands additional revenue. That's obviously for the whole system. Some of that would end up with the companies. A lot of that would have ended up with Transnet and Portnet, and even the taxman would have had a few billion rands more. So those are the easy to fix things. We all lived the Eskom disaster, years of decline, what can be done. And I think, again, the mining industry leads the way with assisting, because we have the balance sheets, we have the need for electricity, and we've been allowed to now install some of our own generation power. But we cannot fix all of the problems of the country. This is a bit of a stopgap, but it will help. It will reduce levels of load shedding, and we may even watch the Springboks play rugby without interruption if we get all of these things right. So the mining industry's longer-term problems, which to some extent is our own fault as well, as we've stopped exploring probably 25 years ago. So South Africa is actually, as illogical as it may sound, a seriously underexplored mining jurisdiction. Now, even if we magically start exploring tomorrow, it is 10 years before significant discoveries makes it past, say, feasibility studies and mines gets built. But we owe it to the next generation to start to fix that now. So lots of things to be done and lots of constructive engagement. All the key stakeholders of the industry in one room discussing it. Nothing comes from discussion, but after discussion, it is now time to implement.
Bernard, you said something, quite key there, that the mining industry has actually stopped exploring. What are the key reasons behind that? Is it a financial issue? Because obviously exploring is very, not only labor intensive, but capital intensive too.
You know, there's a mindset in South Africa that the world owes us their dollars. You know, we've got fantastic potential as a mining jurisdiction, and therefore we can just sit back and people will come knock on our door for the privilege to come and spend their money in our country. Now, that sounds fine until it hits, it hits reality. The rest of the world, every significant mining jurisdiction actually have got enabling legislation. They make it easy. They don't have, like, you have to give 50% of your discovery away before you even have made it. They've got different rules around local participation. And then unashamedly, jurisdictions incentivize people. Exploration is, it's like gambling. It is high risk. You really need to spend $1 million to perhaps drill one hole. And if you get lucky, there may be something. but 99% of the times there's nothing. And yet you have to go through this phase. And therefore, other jurisdictions have got flow-through shares, direct incentives, tax write-offs, and our government has never really had an appetite for this.
So let me ask you then, Bernard, if exploration is not your key activity right now, what then is the bloodline, the backbone of the mining industry?
So we are harvesting our country's resources. We are literally mining more than what we are creating. Now, that is probably permanently true for the gold sector. I mean, after 110 or 20 years, gold mines are now deeper, and most of the easier to mine stuff is probably coming to the end. But when I say end, the next 20 or 30 years. But no industry is sustainable if you only harvest, if you take out more than what you create. And this is where the link with exploration is so critical. But we must start exploring soon, and we must start exploring on a big scale, and then in 10 and 20 years, the next generation will reap the benefits.
As you're speaking, Bernard, I literally have the Eskom situation in my mind, where there has been lack of servicing of the power stations, and therefore we find ourselves in this electricity energy crisis. I think of the water situation, where there hasn't been servicing of dams and plants, and therefore we find ourselves in a water crisis. Is the mining industry not going to find itself in the very same situation, where you now have to start plugging holes because you haven't planned ahead of time?
I think that is true for our whole economy. I think there's a lot of short-term approach. The mining industry certainly have been guilty of it. I think, understandably, mining companies have been trying to diversify their risk. They've even tried to buy more assets outside of South Africa than inside South Africa. But a lot of our mining companies have also acted extremely responsibly. I mean, iron ore industry is in really good shape if only they could export more ore. Our coal industry is actually in reasonable shape. And I think the noise around Eskom was not the coal industry's fault, but probably Eskom's sort of changes in how they wanted to configure their supply side. And we are exporting coal, and we could have exported more. Our most successful sector is probably the manganese sector, which has really expanded. And because of the portion of the world's reserves we own, we could expand even more and export even more manganese ore. So we are as guilty as the rest of the South African economy. Our policies and our legislation has not incentivized longer-term thinking. I would publicly state that I don't think our politicians care much beyond the next election. And I think often senior mining executives also have got a shorter-term view than what is required. It is a long-term industry. It takes 20 years to build a mine, a deep mine. So who takes that sort of long-term time horizon in mind? And yes, therefore, we are probably guilty as an Eskom of perhaps not investing adequately in the near and the midterm future of our industry.
Bernard Swanepoel, it's been a pleasure speaking with you this morning. Thank you so much for your time and giving us a really great view of where the mining industry is at. He is the chairman of the Joburg Indaba.